Hello, so I thought I would do a quick video about my Trifix 694. Also applies to 649, 946, 964, 469, 496, right? Any combination of 4, 6, and 9. And that Trifix's orientation to poetry. And there's a fish tank near me, so if you hear little like water sounds, that's where that is coming from. I hope it doesn't bother anybody too much. So I want to talk about this Trifix's orientation to poetry and where that might come from and what that means, right? Because I've read it in a few places that this Trifix is this kind of gentle philosophical Trifix that can be very into poetry, and I've read that it's kind of represented well among poets, right? And it can be also, musicians who write their lyrics. It can be maybe actors or writers who are, in some sense, very poetically minded, even if they're not poets in the strict definition of that word, or if you're using that definition very strictly, right? But I want to talk about this. So where does that come from in the 469, 694? So, this is a Trifix that is quite gentle, and it's known as the seeker sometimes. So I think it makes sense because this Trifix is seeking answers, is seeking depth and meaning and authenticity. And so it's almost like through poetry they are sort of tapping into that, right? And so they're exploring that through their writing or through thinking, and then it comes out through their writing what they're thinking, right? So with the four's orientation to art and self-expression and finding that meaningful, deep, authentic expression, it makes sense that that can come out in poetry. And with the 6 in the Trifix, the 6 is questioning everything and is seeking answers and is not really landing on anything specific sometimes. So as we know, poetry can be this kind of open-ended questioning. Depends on the kind of poetry, of course, but there's certain poetry out there that is questioning and finding answers and trying to put their thoughts down and kind of get clarity on a situation. And so that's very 6-ish orientation, right? And so the 9 in this Trifix, when it comes to poetry and a poetic expression, has to do with the 9's tendency to, let's say, not be super direct. So 9s can often be accused or can struggle with not being direct, or people who have 9 in their Trifix, like their gut fixation is not directness in a sense, right? So the 9 is the one that is going to go on these philosophical tangents, and specifically 9 being 1. So the 9 has a hard time being fully direct at times, and so poetry is an expression that is this kind of meandering. Depends on the kind of poetry, but there is a kind of poetry or poetic expression that is meandering, that is, seeking answers, searching for a meaning, searching for depth, searching for answers. It's not this kind of, it's not like a science. It's not, like mathematics, although there can be a mathematical element to poetry in terms of the rhymes and like the rhythm of the poem, of like that, how many syllables and all that. But it's an artistic expression that is meandering at times. And so I think this Trifix 694 in any order can be somebody who is naturally in tune with this idea of seeking answers and questioning everything and trying to find depth and beauty and meaning, right? And so it can come out in them writing poetry or reading poetry, because that is a way for them to put it into something or get something out of it if they're reading it. So if I'm thinking about something and it's like this mess in my head, and I'm trying to like land on something, I'm trying to seek some kind of clarity based on all these things that I'm thinking. Like there's all these things in my head and I'm trying to find one lane for it. I'm trying to find some kind of specificness about it, right? So poetry can be a way for me to, on some level, to tap into this kind of, I have all these thoughts and I'm like seeing different angles and finding like meaning in things, and I want to like put it into something specific. I'm trying to put it into some kind of form. And so I think also this trifix, it's just oriented artistically in a way, right? It's a kind of trifix that is, it's this kind of gentle mannered trifix that is naturally inclined to poetry, right? So I think it just makes sense. It makes sense for this trifix to be interested in poetry or to have a poetic orientation to life, because all the three types of their trifix kind of have the role in that. So 4 is the artistic spirit, or the kind of trying to find this depth and this authenticity and this meaning at times, and 6 is questioning and questioning again and questioning what they've questioned and trying to seek answers and asking questions, and it has an existential anxiety, right? This kind of existential tension, and that can come out in very philosophical writings and poetry, right? And 9 is meandering and not sticking and not landing and not sort of, it's kind of not, some 9s are kind of in the clouds in some way, and so poetry is something that people who are in the clouds, like it's an expression for them, it's an expression for those people, because it's a way for them to actually put it into something that other people can enjoy as well, right? So if you're just kind of talking nonstop and meandering and not really landing anywhere, that's not really, you're not really making something out of that. But if you're writing poetry or if you're reading poetry, somebody else's poetry, then you're kind of connecting to that. You're connecting to that energy in a way that is actually fruitful. Even if you are just reading poetry, right? I like to read some poetry sometimes, and I've written a little bit of poetry. So I like to just connect with that. It's the 9 as well. The 9 wants to connect in some sense, although it can also disconnect very easily. It can kind of shut off and disconnect. But so when I write poetry, it's a way for me to get some kind of clarity on my thoughts and my viewpoints, and I'm trying to express it in a way that is interesting or has some kind of some beauty to it. There's an aspect of beauty to poetry, of course, right? And it's a way for me almost to not be super direct. It's a way for me to put my non-directness into something, right? So it's me being constructive about my non-directness and how I see all these different sides and how I'm not very direct at all times, and so I'm actually putting it into something, right? So 4, artistic inclination, searching for identity, maybe. There's more that I could say about that. It's hard to pin it down with the 4. And the 6, obviously the questioning and the seeking of something and the existential anxiety. Like, what is all this for? What am I here for? Like, what is, it's all these questions and all this anxious questioning that the 6 is dealing with. And so that can come out in poetry. And then the 9's orientation is sort of sometimes based around non-directness, if that makes sense. Like, they're not super direct, and so poetry is a way for them to express that. And so I think these 3 numbers coming together in somebody's Enneagram type or their trifix, I think it just makes sense that these people are oriented to poetry in some way, even if they're not poets or if they're not artists in any way, but they would have that orientation to, in some degree, right? To some degree, right? So they would have that tendency to see life in a way that is poetic, and so it's very easy for them to just lean into that and to tap into that. So Lana Del Rey is also this trifix, and she has this kind of, you know, in her music and in kind of in her persona, like she has this kind of gentle like vibe, and the lyrics and the music, it's this kind of you know, romantic, gentle, poetic expression, right? So I do want to make more videos speaking about the Enneagram. So if you want more, do subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed this, and leave a comment if you have anything to say about this. So yeah, thank you for watching. See you next time.